So this story was brought to my attention by an article on the Post-Millennial titled "American Medical Group Demands Biden Big Tech Censor Reporting on Medical Gender Transition of Minors." This talks about a letter addressed to Attorney General Merrick Garland, written in concert with 3 different medical groups. This is obviously very significant because they represent a large number of medical professionals, and therefore this really indicates how far the rot has gotten into medicine. So let's have a look at the letter itself, and I'm going to read the full thing because it's pretty wild. So if you could zoom in a little bit more, John, just so I don't have to squint.
I don't think we can on this because it's a twin image.
Okay. So it starts with, "Dear Attorney General Garland, on behalf of the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, and the Children's Hospital Association, collectively representing more than 270,000 physicians and more than 220 children's hospitals across the country, we write to urge you to investigate the organizations, individuals, and entities coordinating and provoking and carrying out bomb threats and threats of personal violence against children's hospitals and physicians across the US." And I'm going to take a minute to say, yes, I don't approve of bomb threats and threats of violence, obviously. However, that's not what's going to happen, is it?
It's obviously they just bring that up to try and smear you. It's like, you believe in bombing people. I'm like, why? Where have you got that conclusion?
But no, obviously it's going to be used to silence any dissent, as we'll certainly see in this letter. So it carries on to say, "From Boston to Akron to Nashville to Seattle, children's hospitals, academic health systems, and physicians are being targeted and threatened for providing evidence-based healthcare." Evidence-based healthcare. Remember that phrase. These attacks have not only made it difficult and dangerous for institutions and practices to provide this care, they have also disrupted many other services to families seeking care. In one hospital, a new mother was prevented from being with her preterm infant because of the hospital's neonatal intensive care unit was on lockdown due to a bomb threat. Obviously, that's horrible and don't approve of that. Children's hospitals across the nation have substantially increased security in addition to working with local and federal law enforcement both on their main hospital campuses as well as across their ambulatory delivery sites in order to ensure the safety of patients, families and medical staff who work there. In addition, some providers have needed 24/7 security. Children's hospitals and their medical staffs continue to face increasing threats via social media, including to their personal accounts, coupled with harassing emails, phone calls, and protesters at healthcare sites. There is elevated and justifiable fear among families, patients, and staff. And I think that, although I don't approve of the illegal activities, people are understandably angry at what these people are doing to children. Carries on to say, "These coordinated attacks threaten federally protected rights to healthcare for patients and their families. The attacks are rooted in an intentional campaign of disinformation." Is it really disinformation, just exposing what they're doing? I'm pretty sure even the people who are doing illegal things aren't doing it based on disinformation. It's just, we disagree with what you're doing to children.
What they're actually referencing is Matt Walsh, for example, having video from the internal discussions in the hospital, and the video showing the hospital staff discussing that this will make us a load of money, we should do it for the money. That's the disinformation? Like, video evidence.
Yes. Don't believe your lying eyes and ears. Yeah, the attempt to smear it as disinformation is the part that I'm most concerned about, because of course that can expand to what we say on, say, the podcast. Obviously the Americans aren't going to come and get us, but
going back to Chernobyl, I mean, like at the time the stories that the planet exploded was disinformation that needs to be kept down. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. It's just a word that has been abused by every organization that wants to suppress the truth.
Even if something isn't true, I don't think it should be suppressed. You know, that's kind of what the First Amendment's all about in the United States, isn't it?
Yeah.
So carrying on, where was I? So, campaign of disinformation, where a few high-profile users on social media share false and misleading information targeting individual physicians, hospitals, resulting in rapid escalation of threats, harassment and disruption of care across multiple jurisdictions. Our organisations have called on technology companies to do more to prevent this practice on digital platforms, and we now urge your office to take swift action to investigate and prosecute all organisations, individuals and entities responsible. So you may miss it in the wording there, but what they're saying is anyone who criticises us on social media, be they an individual or an organisation, must have big tech censor them and the DOJ come after them. That's what they're trying to say,
because
essentially.
they're spreading what we say are untruths.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, number one, violates the First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, they're not untrue. Number
Yeah.
three, who the hell do you think you are? You want the entire force of the government to come down on these people, not to mention huge tech come out of them as well?
But they're being very slimy about it because they're wrapping it up in very real and unfortunate
I know,
threats.
but could you imagine writing a letter to number 10 in this country insisting that, I don't know, Navarra Media be shut down because they'd got a tape of us saying something that we couldn't defend or something, right? I mean, it's not going to happen because we don't do that. But like, if they did, I wouldn't give a crap.
I wouldn't even
I wouldn't
expect
be
a
like,
response.
they're spreading disinformation, shut down this media company. I think, no, weirdo.
So it carries on to say attacks against healthcare institutions, because of course they haven't mentioned that enough, that threaten violence, intimidation and physical harm, have left hospital staff and their communities shaken. I mean, I'm not surprised that bomb threats are scary. I mean, fair enough. Providers of evidence-based gender-affirming healthcare, which is an oxymoron, and their colleagues are facing increased stress and fear on top of the conditions they have faced while working on the front lines of a global pandemic. And they're going to get their violin out, are they? For nearly 3 years, families seeking care at these institutions, as well as those providing their care, fear for their personal safety in the wake of these attacks. And if we moved on to the second page, there's only a little bit more to read. Our organisations are dedicated to the health and well-being of all children and adolescents. We are committed to the full spectrum of patient care, from prevention to critical care. Prevention, when it comes to, say, transitioning. Does that happen?
Have to deal with gender dysphoria. Is there a prevention stage ever?
I don't think there is there? We stand with the physicians.
Such a great idea, though. Like, this is preventative care for gender dysphoria. We're going to stop teaching the kids about 15 genders. I mean,
That's
that is preventative
a genuinely good idea, yeah.
Yeah. That's never going to come up.
No. So we are committed, yes, already read that part. We stand with the physicians, nurses, mental health specialists and other healthcare professionals providing evidence-based healthcare. They've used that phrase again. I mean, lady doth protesteth too much.
We are healthcare, I swear.
Yes, it's definitely evidence-based. Let me tell you how evidence-based our healthcare is. I'm not insecure about how evidence-based our healthcare is, not one bit, including gender-affirming care to children and adolescents. They only mention gender-affirming care right at the very end. On behalf of the patients and families we serve and the physicians we represent, we thank you for your attention to our request. And then it's, of course, sincerely, American Academy of Pediatrics. Of course, paediatric is a child doctor. American Medical Association and the Children's Hospital Association. So yes, this is quite insidious because obviously it's wrapped up in genuine concerns about threats of violence and bomb threats, which, definitely don't do that.
They're already illegal, so I don't know what you want.
It also doesn't help the cause that you're trying to promote whatsoever. It just makes you look bad and look crazy and makes what you agree with look crazy. So don't do that. But yes, obviously, the evidence-based healthcare thing, that's something that I want to draw attention to because, of course, what evidence is that? Talking of disinformation, I mean, puberty blockers alone cause untold damage to the body and brain. I mean, it caused degeneration of the skeleton. The FDA itself has warned that it may cause brain swelling and could cause permanent blindness. And this is something that quite often gets called a reversible treatment. That reversible blindness that everyone knows about. It's so ridiculous.
Don't worry, limbs grow back.
It's so insufferable. But yes, obviously this claim of evidence-based, if you want to know a little bit more about that, I advise you go to the website and look up this book club on Abigail Schreier's Irreversible Damage, which talks about all of the different damages that these sorts of ideological so-called treatments can cause, far more comprehensive than I can possibly do in the time that I have. And of course, the claim as well that they made that the attacks are intentional disinformation, that's obviously false. People have genuine concerns here and they're trying to present it as if it's all lies. To what end as well? Like, why do they want to spread disinformation. They don't give a justification for why people are motivated to do that. They just say it and expect you to agree with it. So yes,
Source, trust me.
But yes, if you actually want to see how to get some successes, either argue against it with words rather than bomb threats, or take them to court, which seems to have worked in Britain. So recently we had the only children's gender clinic announce that it's going to shut down because it's faced so much legal action, and it seems to have had some sort of impact on public opinion. So if we move on to this British Social Attitude Survey data, so in 2016, 58% of people agreed that transgender people should be able to change their sex on their birth certificate. To 2019, it dropped to 53%, only 5% over 3 years. But then from 2019 to 2021, it's dropped all the way down to 32%, which in a couple of years is massive.
Yeah.
And I mean, that can only be attributed to changes in society and closing down this clinic, stories of detransitioners, these sorts of things, targeting children, the grooming activities, all of this stuff speaks for itself. All you need to do is draw people's attention to it, and it seems to work.
Like if you make horrific demands of society, like I imagine in 2016 when people were asked, they were like, yeah, on a bit of paper, who really cares? But when you say, okay, by the way, that includes that we must be able to come to changing rooms, female prisons, blah, 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 your kids. Yeah, not so supportive anymore. I mean,
Absolutely.
It being down to 32%, I think that's about the bare minimum of Labour supporters. Like the worst possible time, Labour still gets 30% of the vote. So I don't know how much lower it could even go.
It may go down even further because, of course, even within the Labour Party, there are TERFs, aren't there, that oppose transgenderism. So I want to get that number down. We're going to get it further. But yes, obviously the fact that the Tavistock Centre is closing isn't necessarily entirely evidence that public opinion has turned. They are opening regional centres to offer more holistic care that considers other conditions, but obviously that's contingent on the people who run those local hospitals. It could actually end up expanding it further, depending on how it's implemented. That is worth bearing in mind. But I wanted to end with a perspective on this that I very much agree with. This is from Chris Rufo. He says, "This is now the left's playbook. Last year, the National School Board Association, Department of Justice, and the FBI worked together to label parents who oppose critical race theory as domestic terrorists. They want to stifle dissent, suppress speech, and criminalise opposition." And that's exactly what this letter was trying to do, because they don't want to upset the apple cart. They're making a lot of money from this, from doing this to your children, and they're going to try and use the state and big tech to try and stop you from complaining about it.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the Contemplation series that Josh does, on this one being on why women love serial killers. If you want to find out what else Josh is putting out, you can follow him on Getter at Josh_firm on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.